Chapter 43. Pops. The zoo was never lively at 7:30 in the morning. James, Bruce and Michael were heading to the same place at the same time, so it was hardly surprising that they ended up at adjacent tables in the dining room. They couldn't act too close in public, but they exchanged a few taut words before Michael headed upstairs to don his protective clothing. James was tense and only managed half of his Cocoa Pops and a small banana. On the other hand, Bruce had wolfed down scrambled egg, kippers, and 3 slices of bread. "You never get nervous," James said, as the 2 boys headed through the lounge and out of the front door. "I've trained myself to focus," Bruce replied. "Breathing, concentration, and the fact that nothing gets me going like the prospect of a monumental punch-up." James managed to smile, but as they headed down the street, he couldn't help wondering if Bruce's love of violence didn't indicate something not quite right in his head. The weather had turned warm, and Sasha told the boys they'd have an opportunity to change before the raid, so they carried their body armor and guns inside backpacks. "Nice motor," Bruce grinned when he saw wheels waiting for them in the driver's seat of a BMW M5. "Bit fancier than the Astra." The front passenger seat was taken up by a man with a face like 1,000-year-old limestone. James and Bruce squeezed into the back alongside his equally fearsome-looking mate. "James, Bruce, these are the Kruger brothers," Wheels said. "Tony and Tim, this is James and Bruce." "Morning," James said, as he slammed the car door. Chloe had run the Krugers on the police computer and pulled up a long list of suspected armed robberies, but no convictions apart from a couple of stretches in youth custody back in the 1980s. It seemed strange that 2 brothers whose careers had been based around carefully planned robberies were coming to help Sasha take down Major D. But James reckoned it made sense when he saw them up close. Out of all the hard men he'd ever met, these 2 were the ones James would have wanted on his side in a rumble. "Sasha speaks highly of you boys," Tim Kruger said, as he reached across the back seat to shake hands. His voice was gravel, and he clamped James's hand so tight that it felt like he was going to crush bone. But Bruce took his turn as a challenge and squeezed back. James was in the middle, with the 2 arms stretched across his lap, and Bruce's bony wrist apparently being crushed by a fist the size of a ham. After 10 tense seconds, the handshake broke, and Tim Kruger exploded in a volcanic laugh which sent shockwaves through James's body. "Ha ha ha ha! Tough little bugger this one," Tim roared approvingly. "Not much meat, but there's a grip like a vice on him." They drove on for 15 minutes, passing through the Thornton estate where James had lived on his first mission in the area. He felt a slight kick of nostalgia as they skimmed past shabby houses and football pitches that evoked memories of long-forgotten kickabouts. But they drove on through the back of the estate into an area of industrial units that bordered onto the high-fenced compound around Luton Airport. A 737 passed over seconds after leaving the runway, making a roar that shook the entire car. After a few more seconds, Wheels turned off the road into the car park surrounding a branch of Sofa World. It still had closing down and last day 75% off everything banners draped on the exterior. He slowed to a crawl as he cut across the empty parking bays and under a half-opened metal shutter, which was immediately pulled down by 2 members of Sasha's crew dressed in yellow overalls. James and Bruce were baffled as they entered the cavernous space, which still had a scattering of tatty shop fittings and was marked out with aisles and carpeted areas for displaying soft furniture. Half a dozen mad dogs sat on stained and broken sofas that even the final day's discount madness hadn't shifted, drinking tea and waiting for something to kick off. 2 black Mercedes vans and the cab of an articulated truck were parked on the carpet. The vans were freshly painted with the logo of an airport catering company stenciled on the side, while the truck looked like something out of a sci-fi movie, with a thick sheet of plexiglass bolted over the windscreen and a battering ram made from 2 huge H-bar girders welded to the front. James was last out of the car and couldn't help thinking that something was wrong. The Krugers, the passport photographs, and the fact that the airport was miles from where Major D was doing his drug deal had already made James wonder if things were going according to plan. But the setup inside Sofa World sent him into a full-on panic. "You've all made it," Sasha said happily, as he ran out of an office and, clearly knowing better than to try a handshake, gave Tim and Tony Kruger friendly thumps on the shoulder. "It's all come together so well. The gods must be smiling on us." "Is Savas back from the other place?" Wheels asked. Sasha nodded. "He's wired up enough sticks of gelignite to blow the joint sky high." He grinned. "Major D isn't gonna have a clue." "What about the money?" "I just got the call," Sasha said. "The money's on board, and the plane should be taking off from Schiphol any minute now." "Ahem," Bruce said, clearing his throat. "Me and James are putting our butts on the line the same as everyone else. Is anyone going to tell us what's going on?" Over the other side of town, Major D had a spring in his step and the scent of Sasha Thompson's blood. He had 6 men inside the small warehouse to do the drug deal. 30 more were discreetly parked in the surrounding streets, along with specially invited guests from a London-based crew Sasha had ripped off the previous year, and some men from Salford, whose wounds were fresher. Doubting that the Mad Dogs could muster more than 20 men, Major D had adopted a simple strategy. After securing his supply of drugs from the smugglers, he'd let the Mad Dogs enter the warehouse and try to steal them. But when they tried to leave, they'd find the building surrounded by an armed posse outnumbering them by at least 3 to 1. It would be a slaughter. Michael arrived at a meeting point in a side street 10 minutes from the industrial estate where the deal would take place, then walked to the warehouse and moved quickly up a 15-metre access ladder built onto the back. The roof was made from corrugated metal that clanked underfoot. It felt warm on his hands as he laid in front of a ventilation shaft. He pulled a Phillips screwdriver out of his pocket and used it to undo a holding bracket at one end of a moss-covered slat. Once it grated free, he pushed his head through the gap and stared at the warehouse below. Major D didn't use walkie-talkies, so his final step was to sit up and make sure his mobile had a signal. Michael called Major D to say he was in place, then sent Gabrielle an "I love you" text as he looked up at the bright morning sun. It only took her a few seconds to text back. "Keep safe. Love you too." James had all of his protective gear under a tracksuit Sasha had brought for him. They'd taken everyone's mobiles because cops can use them to trace your location, but he still had the transceiver disguised as a sticking plaster stuck on his neck. "Are you going to be in there all day?" James yelled as he thumped on the door of the staff toilet near the entrance to Sofa World. "Takes as long as it takes," Savas said. "And you're not going to want to come in here after I've finished." "But I'm busting," James moaned. "Go out around the back and pee against the wall." "Are we allowed out?" "Just tell Riggsy that I said it was an emergency." Riggsy was one of the older Mad Dogs. He was a serious poker player who hated it when the youngsters got rowdy in Sasha's basement. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, cutting James off as he headed for a fire door. "Savas said it was okay," James said. "He's been in the bog for about 20 minutes. Riggsy found this hilarious, and he yelled at the men sitting on the sofas. "Hear this? The boy says Savas is back on the shitter again." Everyone cracked up, but James was baffled, and Riggsy had to explain. "Savas always gets the squirts when he's nervous about a big operation. Now go out and have your piss, but make it quick, because we're on the move the second Sasha gives the word." James headed through the fire door and out onto a narrow section of concrete. There was only a wire fence between himself and the busy car park of the DIY store next door, so he jogged to the rear of the building and stood facing the wall. "Chloe," he whispered, as he pressed a thumb on the transceiver. The receiver was designed so that it never blurted out a message at an inappropriate moment. The tiny speaker only worked when he pressed the plaster down with his thumb. "Chloe," James repeated, as he pulled down the front of his tracksuit bottoms and tried to extract his penis from inside his body armor. He didn't really need to go, but he had to make a puddle or the others might get suspicious. "James? James, I can barely hear," Chloe answered, before the signal disintegrated into a mass of digital noise. "Where are you? I got stuck in traffic and then we lost both of your mobile signals." "Sofa World, out near the airport," he whispered. "Listen, I've only got a few seconds. We're in deep doo-doo. Sasha's flipped this whole thing on its head. Apparently, untold valuable cargo goes through Luton Airport every day, and the Krugers have been after robbing it for years. Sasha knows all about the warehouse, and we're going into the airport while the cops have their hands full on the other side of town. He's got some massive battering ram, and I've been given plane tickets and a false passport. That's what the photos were for. I don't know all the details, but we're robbing cash from a flight that left Holland about 40 minutes ago. Oh, and Wheels mentioned Major D and sticks of gelignite in the same breath. I reckon they're planning to blow up the warehouse. You'd better get Michael out of there." James stopped talking, partly because he was short of breath, and partly because he had to scramble backwards as a gust of wind blew his pee towards his trouser leg. "Shit," he gasped as he shook himself off and looked at a big wet streak down his tracksuit. It was embarrassing, but it wasn't the most important thing in his life at that moment. He kept his thumb pressed down on the plaster, but Chloe didn't respond. "Chloe," he hissed. "Chloe, did you hear any of what I just said?" There was no response. A second later, Wheels came around the corner. "It's time, James," he yelled. "I've got to drive you to the airport."